Alright, so this is the casting workshop from the 17th of September. We're going to start off with Movie and Sugars doing their first cast. Both their goals are to kind of like to provide information. Their growth places are going to be keeping things concise, so hopefully our helpful audience members will help point out when that hasn't been the case and how to improve on it. For Movie, wants to particularly focus on giving cross commentary that's going to help bring in new players, and for Sugars to try and inspire people to then go out and play more TFT afterwards, which I think is an admirable goal in of itself. So Movie and Sugars, you're both ready?
Yes.
Yes, I'm ready.
Alright, so let's go in 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the grand finals of the Samsung Galaxy Ultra Liga event. We are going into Game 4. Now, Movie, we're going to the back half of this tournament. The last few games, we've seen some pretty strong boards. What are your kind of expectations going forward into this one now that people have kind of got their goals and where they need to be placed in order to get that top 4?
Well, we've seen a lot of Kale reroll the last game. We saw Azir. We saw some Gunners. Feels like a lot of people are forcing Kale this game.
Kale is very strong in the meta right now, especially with the fact that Tristana reroll is also around, so some of the one costs are taken out of the pool there. Makes it a little easier to hit that. And with that said, it does look like we're starting the portal selection. We have 3 interesting choices here: Hall of the Nine, Zoom Zone, and Targon Prime, with a lot of the people looking to be leaning towards that new Hall of the Nine augment. For the new viewers that don't know, that is one where at the beginning of each stage, each player is given a random piece of loot from a highly varied pool. What would you like to see here, Movie?
I mean, Zoom Zone is always the fun one. You know, got to go fast. But Targon Prime, I think that's the most stable one if you're trying to win this tournament.
Agreed. Everyone loves the Stimmy at 40 HP. It's a nice little bonus. Plus, for the people at the top of the leaderboard, they can go ahead and scout the ones who get it early, so it kind of allows them to make a game plan going forward as they want to try to maintain that placement. Vivek here with a 6 gold opener, a Kassadin pair as well. If he's able to get that upgraded to 2-star, that could set him up for a very nice potential for a win streak into stage 2.
Ooh, I'd love to see some Riftwalk here.
Riftwalker would also be incredible. On the top, like speaking of reroll, Riftwalk is one of those very strong and also just very fun augments to watch. I don't know about you, I love watching Kassadin just hop around deleting backline. Not when it happens to me, but I like watching it happen to other people.
I think Riftwalk is one of those really underrated augments that if you take it, you have a really good chance of first to Wraith. If you know how to play it, a lot of the hero augments you can get first place with.
That's a very good point too, especially since the fact that a lot of them, since they are focused around the 2 costs, it's not incredibly hard to hit them, I would like to say. You know, some people, they like to sell their 2 costs later down the line, can help who get that hitting going around stage 3 and early stage 4. We're going to see, hopefully, let's knock on wood, maybe we'll be able to see a Riftwalk coming out of the
Travis Cat has 2 out of 3 Piltover. Oh, he has 3 out of 3 Piltover.
1-4 Piltover. I see people complain about 2-1 Piltover. 1-4 is definitely a early place to hit that. It's going to be interesting to see if he's going to be able to turn this into a nice little cash out for him.
And the thing about having 1-4 Piltover on this Galaxy is Targon Prime. He's going to be able to cash out.
That is a great point too. Yeah, the Stimmy on top of whatever he gets from that T-Hex, plus now with the changes to Piltover, the T-Hex staying around, he doesn't have to sell it. He can keep that combat power, really setting him up for a nice late game. Let's take a look at the augment choices here.
Seems like a lot of the lobby's taking Ornn. I think that's a really good consistent augment because a lot of the time you don't get something that you like, but Portable Forge is very consistent.
I agree. Even with the change of it dropping down to 2 choices, the Ornn items, some of them are just simply too good. Oh, he does choose to reroll it. Oh, we did see the Demon Flower offer it, but he decides to take the Magic Wand. Which makes sense with the early Callista. The early Callista and the 3 Challenger, if he's able to hit a Warwick here and get the level up to get the 4 Challenger, early Callista, I've been seeing a lot of players prioritize that, just for the pure raw single damage target strength that she provides.
Sorry, Boop has asked to pause things. Maybe, do you mind pausing it for a second? What's up, Boop?
Okay, so I just wanted to get like initial vibes going. This is your first time, and I gotta say, for your first time, it sounds pretty good. Sugars, you're doing a really awesome thing in which you're being a very unselfish play-by-play, which in general is a sentence I don't say very often about even about myself. But the types of setups that you're doing are really good. Whoa.
I don't know who that
Nice,
was.
honey bear.
I see.
But movie, what I want you to do is feel more confident taking the space when Sugars is giving it to you. So Sugars a couple times has given you an opportunity to kind of like expound on something or like share your knowledge, but you were more kind of summarizing what Sugars was saying instead of expanding upon it, right? And so what I would like to see is kind of like when Sugars is like, oh yeah, that's a really great choice. A color caster would go in and say, oh, that's a really great choice because of this, this, and this. You have a lot of time, and you could kind of talk into the round where the units are fighting, because then Sugars can decide to talk over you or talk after you and respond to your point, or play by play the fight. But I definitely need a little bit more of that meat when it comes to the color casting when the setup is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to talk. You want at this point on this kind of run through, I want you to think about us telling you not to talk as like the feedback that
Right.
that you were looking for, because again, like when you guys were vibing and being more conversational rather than responsive, it's always going to sound good. And this is going to be my first vocabulary for everyone. So there's two things in casting. There's parallel casting and then there's interactive casting. When you first start out, parallel casting is going to be where you're going to see a lot more of your stuff. And parallel casting is a lot more about two casters that are kind of just sitting next to each other and working together. Interactive casting is when you're really working together in terms of making it a conversation and collaborative effort, right? And that should always be the goal. So with that in mind, let's go right back into what we were doing. Sugars will pick this up because we're going through the fight right now. And then when Sugars does, give you something, I want you to talk for at least, 10 to 15 seconds on this point. But Sugars, that means that your question's got to be good. All right.
I will
Cool.
add on. I will add on to that maybe, because it was interesting because there was one of the things where you said where you explained like the second part of your point after you got prompted again by Sugars. I think like a general sort of good rule of thumb would be, if you ever say something, just explaining the why that's. If you answer the question why that's important, then you're usually in a pretty good spot as to what you're putting across in the cast.
Yeah, exactly. So the casters should always be wondering about the why, right? So everything is kind of informed by that as well. So that's a really good piece of feedback counter. All right. Are we good to start again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm gonna count you down 3, 2, 1, and then Maisie, you're gonna start right when I hit 1, and then Sugars, you're just gonna go, and then we'll just get through it. Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. And in 3, 2, 1.
So our first fight, we see Wojtek up against Shredden. Wojtek with the early strategist emblem and the Ginsus kind of sets him up for a very easy path into that, like you were talking about earlier, movie, that Azir strategist board that we were kind of hoping to see again.
Yeah, it definitely seems like he's going to play Azir this game. If you get the early strategist, it lets you play 4 strategists, 5 strategists, which spikes you really hard into the late game.
On top of the fact that he also already has 10 gold, he's going to be able to hit that even earlier than some, on top of the stemmy he will be getting at 40, assuming he gets there quicker than most.
Oh, we have Stinky Abuser over here pumping up. He looks like he's going full open. Probably going to go tech into the Aphelios late game.
That makes sense with the double bastion as well. He also has the single Ginsus at the ready. Hopefully he'll be able to have item prio as well if he does continue this open fort. Go for that double Ginsu that we've been seeing the Aphelios players like to take a lot. And it makes sense in the comp, right? You want to be able to ramp up with that big front line.
And a lot of the people here, they have no issue open forting because, again, of the Targon Prime.
Yes, exactly. The Targon Prime will make things very interesting. Speaking of open...
Pause. I'm so sorry. Pause. So, movie. I think I'm going to use that moment for a little bit of a teaching moment here. So when right after you said Targon Prime, you get to make a decision as a caster to pass it off or keep going. And I think that once you kind of introduce a new idea, right? When someone's like, "Oh, Targon Prime," and that's the first time that we've heard about it, it's always a good idea to define it. right? So, and kind of like speak on it. You have a lot more time to talk if you want to. So just like really get some into the nitty gritties, because in order to get some of these new players on, you're going to have to talk through some of these details. Does that make sense?
Right. So if you're talking about that point, should you introduce it like you are talking to a new player, or should you?
Yeah, so like be like, oh, Targon Prime, when I use Targon Prime in my games, this is how I work with it, right? Let's see if the players are going to be doing the same thing, right?
Okay.
And then so like in the middle there, you'd be saying, oh, kind of like your personal opinion on it, because one thing that you're always going to be able to offer that other color casters won't be able to offer is the fact that you have sat in that chair before. You know what I mean? So like anytime, like, when I'm in a tournament, this is not the augment I want to see because it's too risky, and it's risky because of this. Sugars, I'm curious to see where that's going to go. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so Sugars, you're going to ask the same question. All right, in 3, 2.
Sorry, I just want to come in on just to expand a little bit for the movie there. You mentioned you were specifically looking to bring up new players, and there was a little bit of confusion there as to whether or not to outright sort of treat people like they haven't played it before. You'll be speaking to different audiences when you're doing a cast. So you'll be casting to people who are pretty new at TFT. You'll be also casting to people who've got quite a lot of experience. You can kind of include all of those audiences in what you're saying by briefly mentioning what the thing is. Like, remember that 40 HP is the we'll see the supply drop coming in for the player, and this is going to matter in this context. Blah 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 blah. You don't make it.
Right.
You don't make the informational part the focus of what you're saying, but you just include it there for people who don't know it.
Okay.
Cool.
Got it. And just to confirm, the question you're talking about, Chris, is just setting up the potential, I guess, for lack of a better term, storylines with Targon Prime.
Yeah, this is this is a little bit too much right now, but the reasoning and the context right now is because it's the beginning of the game, and you have a lot of opportunities to talk about things that you're going to see later at this point in the game. So like, what's going to happen? What are we looking forward to when we hit 40? These are all kinds of things that we could touch on.
Okay.
The pumping, the movie, the previous thing that you talked about when it came to the augment choice, that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of doing that like super well. You talked about the early game and blah blah blah, right? That's kind of like the vibes we're going for. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
More things will, as the game goes through, the pace of the game and the amount of stuff you're going to need to talk about will start to increase. That's why getting that stuff out of the way at this point in the game can be so good, because you then later on, your foundation for being like, remember when we talked about this before, now we can build on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Got it.
All right. In 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go.
So with that Targon Prime portal, you're going to see a lot of players kind of potentially revolve their game plan around that 40 HP injection of loot and or gold. Movie, how would you like to see some players kind of play this out?
Well, especially with the pumping up player, I think a good idea would be to open for just completely sell your board, make that econ, prepare to get to 40 HP, and then use those items to your advantage. I think you'll really spike really hard at that point, and you can cash out like the Piltover player.
Yes, I agree. On top of the fact that, again, he does get the item Prio, so not only will he likely have the best slot for Aphelios, he'll have that extra stuff from the stimulus as well to kind of strengthen up the rest of his board. Here we see an early Void player with the early Rek'Sai choosing not to slam any items. Do you think that he might be looking to potentially do a Rek'Sai reroll, or is he just waiting to kind of slam general good late game items such as Ginsu's to set himself up for success down the line once he does get that stimmy?
I feel like he might be going to the Rek'Sai here. It's uncontested. He took Ezreal, so he has a lot of good items. He has a BT on bench. I feel like he could slam for Rek'Sai and play that right now.
Ooh, and as we're talking, we see an unfortunate, very early Piltover cash out. Granted, it was at 0 stack, so it looks like I'm not completely sure if that was the 2-1 Piltover player that we saw earlier, but regardless, it is unfortunate to see a Piltover board winning as early as 2-3.
Yeah, that's the issue with these lobbies. Piltover, even if you get it on 2-1, it's a little risky because everyone else is going to full open.
Exactly, yes. We've seen 2 of those already. Now we're going into this next carousel. Let's see what the people at the bottom, what kind of items are going to be prioritizing. Usually you see a bow like to be taken low. A bow makes it to the second round of choosing. People, like I was saying earlier, people have really been valuing Ginsu's this set, and I think for good reason. A lot of the late game 4-cost units are able to use it quite well. it makes sense that people would want to be able to get the components to make that item as early as possible.
Yeah, I think Gwynsu's is a very consistent item. You want it on most of your carries, Azir, Aphelios, Zeri. Everyone can use it really well.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Going into this board, ooh, this potentially looks like could either be dedication. Yeah, dedication is an interesting argument that you don't see too often, to my knowledge. But for comps such as Strategist and Shurima, it's possible. Though I will say with Strategist, it's a little hard to get 4 in as early as possible. Shurima, it's looking like this might be a vertical Shurima board.
It's looking like a vertical Shurima board, which I think is very, very consistent.
Especially with the duo carry damage potential of that Akshan and Azir, you can be deleting units quicker than you can imagine sometimes.
We have a bit of a win-loss-win going to the Piltover board, so it might be a win-loss-win-win, but this Piltover board's actually looking a little bit strong. I don't think he's going for a cash out.
Yes, the Hullbreaker combined with the Stoneplate makes for a very, very tanky front line that's going to be really kind of hard to burst down in 2-5 when you just don't have enough damage to really get through it. As you can see, this Vi here is living almost to the very end of the fight. She gets
this Vi 1 is living to the very end of the fight.
This Vi 1 is a beast, and that's one of the reasons I think people like to, again, going back to what you were saying earlier about that Ornn item selection, it's items like Hullbreaker and Trickster's Class. They give you that strong front line in the stage 2 that can help set you up for success and a streak going into neutrals.
It looks like Shredden with the early 4 challengers is trying to play Ghost Isles, but there's already a person with the Shadow Isles spat.
That would be an interesting to come back to later and see just how contested they are, because as we know, within that board, whether you're playing challengers or Ghost Isles, Callista, very, very high priority unit, and ideally you would like to get her to 3-star, but when you have someone else holding that, we'll have to wait and see if they're going to be able to pull that off. Ooh.
Again, with the full open, everyone in this lobby is trying to loss streak, but they're all contesting each other. It's just a gamble at this point.
It's like I would like to see if Stinky Abuser was able. I'm assuming with how low Stinky and Nevada are, it seems like they were able to get that 5 loss streak. It's rare to see someone dipping below 70 unless they are in fact full 5. We'll have to check their econ when we come back to their boards. Going into neutrals here, we have a Shiv and Gunblade Slam. Now this could potentially open the board. I believe this was the player we thought might be doing Rek'Sai reroll, but now it just looks like they're playing tempo into Kaisa, would be my guess.
Either Kaisa or Sorcerers with Void. He's holding all the Void units. He's holding the Bruisers.
Yes. Yeah, and getting that Swain, having the Swain at the ready potentially too. Yeah, he's keeping his lines open, I think, which is smart. He's not committing too early, especially he wants to see kind of how the second augment also plays out too. And once the openers kind of start to build their initial boards, he can start to make some decisions going into stage 3 here.
I really like the items he slammed. He slammed Gunblade Shiv. Those are 2 of the most flexible AP items you could possibly slam.
Completely agree. The magic resist shred is always going to be good, and the healing will always benefit your front line. I'm very excited to see where this board will go into the late game.
He also chose to pick Ezreal. There's a lot of different hero augments in this lobby. There's Ezreal, there's Ornn, there's Master Yi. Seems like everyone is keeping their options pretty flexible.
Yeah, and I think that's very good for the state of the game too, right? It gives you, kind of lets you key in on the playstyle you like to do. Lots of things are viable, and there's no one just kind of like force type of augments choices that are happening here. I personally am a big fan of Ezreal because I like the board value that the multiple items bring. Yes, it lost the gold in the nerf a few patch cycles ago, but the items themselves are just always going to be very helpful at every stage of the game.
I think 2 of the most consistent augment choices right now are Ezreal and Ornn. You just can't really miss. They give you good choices on every stage. You get items, you get golds. It's just very consistent.
Completely agree. And here we're going to see one last hopefully we're going to be able to see Stinky Abuser kind of rubber band this loss streak back, because he is only going to be 1 loss away from that 40 HP cash out like we were talking about. So if he's able to take 1 more loss on 3-2, rubber band that into a win streak going into the rest of the stage and into stage 4, he's setting himself up for a very nice late game here.
Yeah, Stinky Abuser actually chose to make his board weaker again. He sold all his units. He put his items back on the bench. He's playing this loss streak very well.
Okay,
completely agree.
Maisie, can we pause there?
All right, I feel like I should have been doing more setting up. I got a little lost in the sauce there.
Yeah, well, so I guess Sugars then movie. What are your kind of initial feelings coming out of that one?
I definitely also just woke up a little bit ago. I'm definitely a little nervous. I need to definitely like this is something where with enough practice I'll become more comfortable. I'll feel more natural. But yeah, I'm just a little bit in my head at the moment, which is something to work on.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the nerves too. Even though I know this is like, smaller, safe space, it's just, first time on the
Right.
mic. It's a little nerve wracking.
Yeah.
I was definitely, I think, feeling it towards the end of the stage there. Once we started jumping around the different boards, just having to keep track of everything and trying to keep the storylines concise. It got a little tough. But like you said, maybe like I think with more practice, it should only get easier.
Also, I think it definitely helps. Like this is something where you can do research on. So like me specifically, I don't know. It would help if I actually did know the storylines. I know you can make it up,
Mhm.
but coming into this, I don't know any of the players in the tournament. If I knew the players, I could provide be like, oh, this person is doing this. This person was practicing this, and
Good
it would
point.
just be yeah. But yeah.
Okay. So I think probably we'll end with me and Boop on like giving feedback. I don't want to kind of like override what other people have got to contribute. Has anyone got any thoughts from that first stage?
I do.
Go for it, Rain.
I think a lot of what I initially taken notes on came in the pauses, and one of the things that really helped me, like I'm having to take a step back and realize, like, oh, this is like your guys' literal first cast. And one of the things that really helped me early on was asking questions as a handoff, because it feels like there's an observation that kind of ends at a full stop. So being like, what augment choice would you take here, or what direction do you think this player might go?
Mhm.
And handing it off that way with an obvious handoff early, right? I think as you develop rapport with other casters, the handoffs become a little more clear,
Mhm.
and you can just kind of feel them. But a good way to develop that rapport is to get into that rhythm of engaging with the other person. And I just to kind of piggyback a little bit on um, the expanding a point, right? There was a point towards the end where you were like, this is probably going to be a Shrima board. Why? Right? Like that's the interesting piece of
Mhm.
like what gives you that insight, right? Or what line? Why do you see that line? Right? I can see that,
Mhm.
but there might be somebody who has no idea. Like, wait, what? How are you? And I as a newer player years ago, thought that of like how do you get there from here?
Mhm.
And you were like, movie, I think you were like, that's going to be very stable or strong later. Again, why? Why is it going to be strong? When you talk about like, oh, we're going to spike that board later, what is going to, like, why is it going to spike that board?
Mhm.
Things like that. Why are, Shiv and Gunblade flexible on AP? What units can they go on? What purpose does it serve? It helps to kind of pad out that point, and it, informs me so that I can apply that to my game. I go, oh, I didn't realize Shiv was that flexible. I've only seen it in a comp guide as being good on one unit. I didn't
Mhm.
realize I could play flexibly with it. Those are my thoughts.
Got it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to like go too crazy into it. But I agree with Rain a lot. A lot of it that you guys were doing that was really good is the what, but weren't following through with the why. I think Boop was telling me you both are like very good DFT players as well, so I know that you like have all this information, you have all this knowledge. I know some people get a little scared of going into the weeds, and I think that it's good to have that instinct. But you definitely can in the early game expand on some points, right? We saw Piltover show up, but it wasn't a cash out. A lot of people see Piltover, they think it can only be a cash out, but had an opportunity to explain Win Streak Piltover because they were playing a very strong board, right? They were slamming items with
Mhm.
Piltover in. So you can take a second and talk about that. You saw like an Ezreal player with Gold Ezreal Augment that didn't slam a single item. You can go into maybe why that was going on, right? There's some opportunities to like take a point that you called out. You're like, oh yeah, they didn't slam any items. They might be on Rek'Sai. Like what? You talked about they had a Bloodthirster slam. Why haven't they slammed this Bloodthirster? What are they trying to do? Are they keeping options open? What other comps could they do with that? Just continuing really, I mean, Rain hit it on the head. A lot of it is that why, right? Explaining that why and elongating your points, because you guys were kind of just going back and forth a lot with a lot of what's. But I want to know what stories throughout this game we're going to follow, because you're setting the stage for yourself later on. So you talk about this Piltover player who's win streaking. So that's going to swap out, but how rich is this player going to be? Are they going to be able to play really high economy throughout the rest of the game? With someone like the Rek'Sai, you said it's uncontested, but no slams, so they're not playing for tempo. Are they playing for higher gold? Are they playing for that 40 HP? Is that continuing to come back up? I think those are kind of the big things to look at. Is look to expand your points more, and continue to build out specific narratives.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question about like play-by-play versus color caster. That's something you guys decide beforehand, and what exactly is like the difference?
So the way that I kind of talk about it is play-by-play is the people, like if you think about like a color by numbers book, right? The play-by-play is kind of like putting the lines down and the color is what's filling it in, right? So a lot of times play-by-plays will do a lot more on framework and what's going on and building hype and building the initial storylines that the colors are going to be a little bit more responsive to, if that makes sense. So a lot of times the color caster is going to be filling in color, adding things to make the narrative a little bit more holistic. So the why is a big part of that. So when making a claim, you usually have to put a why on there, and so that's usually what the color caster is. Therefore,
yeah, there isn't so much of a. I don't think there's so much of a harsh divide as you would have in something like League of Legends, where the play-by-play.
yeah, no Overwatch.
Yeah, where it's like it's specifically there. Play-by-playing is more like a sort of a subset skill in TFT, where it's a really good thing to have, but as being said before, it's like it's more of a.
If I can just butt in
Yep.
for a second on this topic, I'm driving, so sorry if the audio is terrible. This is something that I'm particularly passionate about. I've since the beginning of my TFT casting, have kind of worked really hard to be a play-by-play guy. To talk more about what's happening in the overall game, where the color talks a lot more about different mechanics and players and those kind of storylines, where for play-by-play I'm keeping it all connected, and it's almost a little bit more like hosting. I know Counterfeit and I have talked a ton about that, especially when you're in the TriCast kind of setup. Those play-by-play / host people are really important, and so a lot of times that is kind of the role of the play-by-play is connecting everything, keeping us focused on what's important, but also allowing the color to color in, like Boop just said.
Got it.
Got it.
That makes sense.
Cool. Do we have any more non-me and Boop feedback for Sugars and Mivy?
Yeah, I got something.
Yeah.
I'll start with Sugars. Well, I suppose this is for Sugars and Mivy, but I just wanted to commend you all both, because that being your first broadcast is like miles better than many people. It's clear you're both passionate about the game.
Yeah.
Sugars, I loved your conviction. I loved your confidence. I love the way you paced your speech specifically. Like, you could tell me the sky was green, and I'd be like, yeah, it is. Like you were very, very believable, and I found you to be very engaging because of that. And for Movie, it's obvious you have a lot of game knowledge, which is fantastic, because the average player, especially when your goal is to get people more interested in the game, aren't gonna know that. And you're putting it forward in a way that the average audience member would be able to understand. You're not just reciting stats or analytics or anything. You're making it very digestible and easy. And I think with a little bit more confidence, you're gonna kick some serious butt. So well done, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
One piece of feedback.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, please.
One piece of feedback I had for the very early game was that I think there were a few opportunities to talk about not just what the players on screen were doing, but with this UI, the choice of legends and choice of first augments. I think that was on like 1.3 and then 2.5, where the UI was able to display like, hey, here are the augments everybody has chosen, and here are the legends that they're going with. I think legend diversity has been one good topic of conversation as long as legends exist, whether there's a meta that goes around selecting your legend. And I also think that knowing the first augments everybody has chosen will offer a little bit of insight into how the game is going to play out. And that goes into Cast's point about how, you're setting the stage for yourself later on in the game.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Oh, cool. Is anyone else before we go to me and Boop?
Yeah, I was a little late on this, but I wanted to jump on Maisie's example. I think just as like a simple rule, if you will, you can hear a smile. And so just to like, if you're having fun during a cast, it speaks volumes for the cast. So just keep that in mind. I think you guys did a great job with that. But yeah, I think it's important to just make sure that your audience knows that you freaking love what you're doing. And I think that's something a lot of the great casters do well.
Yeah, well said. All right. Anyone else? Okay. I think a lot of the ground's already been covered by what people said. I'll let Boop wrap up the rest of the stuff. I think for movie, the big thing I'd love to see you do in stage 3, maybe we'll do a little bit of stage 4 as well, just give it more runway to this in. It's just what people have been saying already, which is taking the stuff that you are saying and noticing it and using that to predict stuff about the game to come. And like what that means for the overall game. Like, are they going? This is going to give them a really strong late game, or this is going to let them break someone's win streak, or just putting in stuff like that, which will help build out the story of the game as a whole, and keeping track of that stuff. Towards more on Sugar's side, the one thing which a bit like how Vex was saying was like that you can add in that will help make the cast more rounded is to notice things about, say, what's going on with people's HP and what's happening in the lobby as a whole, because that feels like that's something that's very good for a play-by-play style caster to keep track of, because it's very concrete information.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Boop, did you have anything else to throw in?
Yeah, I have a couple things. So the vocabulary word that we're using in terms of like this, the legends and all this stuff, in casting, we call that the hierarchy of information. So basically it's a pyramid, right? And if you get to the point, which is the what, and you don't explain the why, the pyramid just falls over, right? You can't build a pyramid on its point. So you have to build the foundation. And so when you say things like, oh, this is cool and I like that, right? Anytime you have an opinion that you say on a cast, you have to share why, right? Because that's what your job is at the end of the day. So like everything that we're talking about can also be can be kind of put in that bucket of the hierarchy of information. What is going to be required for me to know to understand at the end of the game why this person won? And it's very, very hard because there's just so much information, and it actually, especially since you're professional players, right? You have the most information, mostly out of everyone. So your jobs are to find out, if you had a special glasses that showed you exactly the right thing to say at that moment through all of the sea of info, what that would be, right? In the early game, that could be legends. It could be augments, right? It could be a little bit of humor, because by game 4, right, maybe you've talked about it a little bit. You just want a little bit of a change of pace, right? Think about those things more as tools in your toolbox rather than boxes to check. Right? You should never really go into the early game and be like, I'm going to do this, this, and this, right? Of course, you're going to, get into that process. But, as you kind of build out what you find important as your foundational knowledge, that's kind of I think a great way to pick out the individual subjects that you talk about at the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
Cool. And then
Boop, so what? I don't think it's something you can say for us. I've just realised I'm just saying that we're getting quite far behind time.
Okay, I got one more thing to say.
Okay.
And then number 1, sugars, just relax. You're doing that thing where you're trying to sound like a caster instead of sounding like sugars. So I think it's part of how you're trying to project your voice a little bit, but just relax a little bit and kind of just lean into your chair, and you're doing a lot of the basic stuff really well. So just kind of be confident in that, and then be yourself as you move forward. But yeah, the two things: hierarchy of information and your natural voice. Going back to the why.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, Casanova, you wanted to put something in?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up because Counterfeit, you made a really great point about like kind of predicting what's going to happen later in the game. I think that's a really important skill, and it reminded me that one thing that a lot of casters stumble up on is they are so afraid of like being incorrect about something. It's okay to be wrong, not about like factual information, like what augment this is or that kind of stuff. But what I mean is predicting something that's going to happen later in the game. It is okay to predict something that you think is going to happen and have it not happen. And so I think that a lot of new casters will be like, oh, well, hopefully, or maybe this will, like, if you know that this is what it's supposed to be or what this setup is, you can say it. And if it doesn't happen, you can also be like, oh, this is surprising because they did this. One example was the Ginsu Slam early alongside pumping up and then playing open fort. And it was like, well, hopefully they'll be able to get item picks off. Instead, it's like, no, they'll be losing a lot of HP here. They'll get their item picks. And because of that, they're going to be able to spike around the 40 gold on the big roll down. If that doesn't happen, that's okay. You can explain why that didn't happen. But that's just setting the stage because you know that that's how this game is supposed to play out. Like you as pro players recognize it. That's how this is supposed to play out. It's okay to just say that. It's okay to just say that this is how it's going to play out.
Okay, got it.
And basically, just to summarize that in a little mantra you can do, something that a very good caster told me is the worst kind of caster is a caster without an opinion. So take that as you will.
Okay, I am a little worried for you, Movie and Sugars. You've been given a huge amount of information there, and I don't know how much that you can take forward meaningfully. But for this point, just so people have kind of got something to use as a measuring stick here, if from whatever of that stuff like stuck in your head enough to go with it, would you mind at this point sort of setting what from that huge amount of information will you try and apply for this next stage so we can kind of evaluate if you manage to do that or not?
Movie, you can go ahead and go first. I think you're kind of stealing it.
The main thing I took, like I've just been playing this in my head. It's like I would put a sticky note on my or on my monitor, and it would just be the big letters Y. That's the big thing I took away from this. Y.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally agree.
So that's the main thing I have in my head is like going to this. Oh, I would really like to take social distancing. Why would I want to take it? Because it'll spike my late game so much harder.
Okay.
That's like the main thing that I just have in my head. Like explain why.
Casanova. I don't know. This is maybe irresponsible, but let's try it anyway. Every time you hear movie not say why, could you use the soundboard to make a quack sound?
Oh wait, wait.
It's already derailing.
You know what's really funny? I know I used to have a Y sticker on my computer. I'm not gonna lie. So like whatever you need to do, yeah.
I don't have any sticky notes, but I'll keep a mental note.
Yeah, I got the soundboard on lock.
All right. Okay. So for Sugars, oh, there we go. Watch out for that duck. So yeah, Sugars, what's your goal for this next stage?
I think kind of to complement what Movie was saying, try to help him set up the why, you know,
Okay.
And focusing on kind of like one aspect at a time. I know we're kind of getting into stage 3, so it's going to be a little harder to elaborate on some points, but if I can help set him up to explain the decisions being made, but especially in a way that, you know, the casual viewer will also be able to understand too. I don't want to, like you said before, get too into the weeds, but kind of try to be a good partner and help Movie express his game knowledge, just to kind of keep things flowing well.
Okay, well, there doesn't seem to be any easy way to fit a duck quack into that one, which is a shame.
That's a good point. What is
when you're putting on your caster voice, we'll get you a quack.
There we go.
That's right.
I like that
we
one.
Probably
I like that
need
one.
different sound effects so we can differentiate them. How about? No, it's a bit too.
Oh god.
Gotta be a little snappier.
Jesus.
Okay, air horn. So
there we go.
Air horn.
Would you mind air horning anytime we hear Sugars getting a little too caster voicey? And or I don't know if someone else wants to take on the responsibility of trying to track 2 players
Yeah,
at once.
Boop, you want the air horn? I got the quacks.
I like it.
All right, so there you go. If you hear the air horn, Sugars, pull back on the being a caster, and maybe
Got it.
if you're not saying why, you'll get quacked at. Amazing.
Okay.
This is education.
Oh, I love it. This is the
All right.
holistic approach to learning.
Okay.
All right, Maisie, you ready to bring us back in?
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
All right, cool. Let's start again in 3, 2, 1.
So going into the 3-2 augment selection stage here, Shredden's he's going to hopefully want to prioritize a combat augment to try to maintain his streak. Movie, if this was you and you were in this position, which one would you like to try to lean towards?
I find it really interesting that he just rerolled social distancing. He's 100 HP streaking. He wants a combat augment. And my big question is, why did he reroll?
That's a great question. And as we can see here, he takes golden ticket, which is very interesting, especially on the back of that streak. So he's no real true combat value here. Picked up the early Zeri, did sell the Zeri. So it looks like he might be really wanting to commit to this, trying to get that Callista 3 on 7 with that golden ticket augment. Or bronze ticket, sorry, rather.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that he's choosing to take a reroll augment here. I feel like it would be a really good option to push tempo, especially with this early Callista, this 100 HP streak. He really wants to keep it, but I think he's choosing the more reroll routes.
Especially interesting, too, that he's sitting on a lot of pairs as well. And rather than trying to roll to upgrade his board to get strength in the realm of stronger units, he's choosing to sit on that, and he's looking like he might get punished here from the Cassiopeia, the triple itemized Cassiopeia, mind you. That's quite unfortunate that he's going to be losing his streak there. He's going to have to reevaluate kind of his standing and how he wants to play out the rest of the stage.
Yeah, early streaking 100 HP, especially when you have 4 pairs, 100 gold, I think it's a really good idea to maybe roll down to like 35 gold, 1 or 2 rolls. That could have kept the streak, and now he's losing around 6 gold.
Yeah, not the best. And as we talk here, we are getting our first look at what that Targon Prime package is. It's looking like it was a spatula, 2 components, and a golden champion duplicator. Going to be interesting to see how people choose to play around that. With everyone getting a spat, we might also start to see more of those vertical traits coming online. Which of the vertical traits, which one do you think would be the strongest to work around that spatula, Movie?
I think a lot of the lobby is going to be going to Shurima. We saw 2 strategist emblems. We saw a lot of Gwinsu slammed. A lot of people are playing early Shurima boards, and I think that's definitely the most flexible one to slam.
Completely agree. Especially when you see, like we were mentioning earlier, the rise in popularity of Ginsu. Seeing a lot of Ginsu slammed as well. Azir, great holder for that item. And we're going to see how those people play out. You see Callista here getting lots of spears into that Maokai, cuts him down, now onto the Tristana. Though Tristana is focusing her down. The Kaisa about to get her second cast off, and the Soraka goes down, which secures the win for that round for Spotty.
A lot of the challenger players are going to want to be slamming Ionia Spat, probably on the Callista. It really helps a lot with their attack speed to shred down those units.
Yes, that is a great item to emblem holder for that, especially too if they do choose to kind of pivot into the late game into a Belveth. A Belveth is also
with a rod on Carousel.
Oh, that is a great pickup for Travis Watts. Looking at his augments as well, he's got the You Have My Sword and the Small Forge. So hopefully we'll be able to have him slam another item there off that Azir to kind of keep that board strength going on into the rest of this stage.
I haven't seen any auction rerollers yet. Oh, actually, speaking of it, there is one.
Speak of the devil. Oh, and there comes the Callista pair. Early Gwen on the bench as well. If he does get something to complement that, that could be a really strong. And he's going to need to, like I said, rubber band this loose streak. He's been unable to do so. It's getting a little low, and it's getting a little scary here for Stinky Abuser.
Shed in the shop. He's looking like he's going to be playing the 4 Shadow Isle, 4 Bastion board. He's rolling, but he's 20 HP.
Chooses, and he gets an early Lux 2 as well. Very interesting. You normally don't see Lux 2 in that Shadow Isles board. There's no sorcerers or Demacia units to help complement him. So he's really just kind of playing true flex, play what the shop hit or gives him here.
At this point, he's just throwing him to the wall, hoping he can survive long enough.
It almost seems as if he's, I don't want to say conceding, but just trying to hopefully kind of play for placement. At this point, when you're this low gold, the items he's given, the units on his board, it's going to be really hard to, again, rubber band this back. And he is going to take another bad loss. That rogue board really kind of tearing him up.
It's really unfortunate. He was hoping he could spike off the stimmy that he would get, but it was only a spatula, and he doesn't have any items that he can slam with the spatula, so he's not able to spike.
Exactly, great point. As we know, Shadow Isles, you are unable to craft a emblem from that. You have to either get it through an augment or a Tome of Traits. And here with this Zed reroll board is one that I've been seeing kind of rise in popularity. It's one of those that's kind of been floating around throughout the set, but have never been like kind of had its true place in the meta, maybe in the early set. But it's interesting to see someone pull it out here on such a high stakes game, such as Game 4 of this finals.
Yeah, I think this Zed reroll board is very consistent. But my question is, oh, there he goes. He didn't slam the Titans. And I was wondering why.
He did have the double bow at the ready. That's a great question. Luckily, he has it in now. Hopefully, it'll be able to work. Let's see if this Lux 2 can put in some work. Lux, as we know, has great single target damage. In comps and going against boards like this Renekton, who's just solo frontlining, she can really shred him. But between the Shurima healing and the triple itemization, and he does go down. Azir, though, with the Guard Breaker, is very useful against the Taric, gets the bonus damage versus those shields. This is going to be a close fight if the Azir can keep pumping this out. Oh, but the Lux gets her second cast off again.
And he did finally hit that Gwen, and he hit the Taric. He didn't have the Taric in before for Sorcerer, but he finally hit it.
That's a good point. Taric is a very nice power spike for that board. Lots of frontline, lots of shielding, and the triple trait helps to, kind of just get more general origin and class strength.
Double Azir pair. We see the Vi player. It looks like he's going to go put those items onto a Nasus. He hit the Azir too.
That is a huge get.
And everyone in the lobby goes to his board because there's like 4 Azir players right now, and 5 Azirs.
Wow, that is a lot. And it's really good that he was able to have such high econ going into neutrals. I know some players like to kind of get that early rolling going to try to hit their units before everyone else. So the fact that he was able to roll 50 gold before even fighting the wolves probably really helped him secure that Azir upgrade.
Perfect items for Azir. Gunblade, Guardbreaker, Deathcap. He has everything.
That is great. He's really setting up for a very, very strong stage 4 here, especially if this third augment he gets helps complement it as well. I'm hoping to see him possibly get an upgrade on that frontline too. Yes, the Hullbreaker and Stoneplate is a very strong combination, but as we get later into the game, you're going to want a little bit more to complement that in the vein of another upgraded unit or upgrade on that unit themselves.
Nevada does use the Spatula Samus Slayer Spat on the Katarina. It's very good for the healing.
Completely agree, yes. Slayer Katarina is awesome, especially with that rogue reset. Helps her survivability quite a bit.
Singing user still has Spatula. I wonder if he's going to slam a Sorcerer Spat, try to go for a Sorcerer board, maybe?
I believe he would, because I can't think of another option as to why he would want to hold it. Either that, or he could be greeting for a potential Spatula on the carousel. Get a free fawn in there, and that could also act as a possible Sorcerer +1. Ooh, this is Azir triple itemized.
Okay, this was a really important fight he needed to win. He is 1 life right now.
That is huge, and hopefully we'll have this third augment will really help him secure that streak going in, because 16 HP in stage 4, quite a scary prospect.
I always like to take job well done here, just if you're low on items, but Know Your Enemy is a really good combat augment. He does have enough items, so I think Know Your Enemy is a really great choice.
Yes, especially the fact that we've been seeing a lot of Shurima and Strategist players that he'll be going against, so he'll get that nice little bonus from Know Your Enemy. It's going to really help him kind of shred those boards down.
Okay.
Wow.
I think that's
5
Azirs. To pause it. Maisie, would you mind pausing that one in?
Yeah.
Alright. So Sugars movie, how are you feeling about the second stage you did?
I feel like that was a lot more like concise and consistent. I feel like I feel like there's definitely big improvement from the first time, and I think I can continue and improve just as I let my anxiety fix itself.
Yeah, I definitely I hear you being more comfortable, like expressing the knowledge and whatnot. It's a good job on like executing on the stuff that was being set up. That was really good, I think.
Thanks, you too.
Sugars, how about yourself?
I think I started to stray a little bit sometimes, kind of went into that rambling, close to that rambling-esque, but thankfully movie jumping in like helped keep me tied down. I think having him there really helped me keep my head on straight and such, especially like as it gets later into the game, more big decisions are being made, and I was having a little hard time keeping track of that all kind of happening at once. It's one of those I think I just need to kind of step back, take a breath, and just know like, okay, I know what's happening in front of me. I just need to be able to stay on track and verbalize that. I think the pressure too of just not having as much time to breathe in stage 2 versus stage 3. That's something I need to get a little more used to, and just kind of like managing that load of information that's coming in and such.
Okay.
But I do think I improved a little bit on some aspects from the first stage too. It wasn't a total like, oh, I'm lost completely. As the nerves are still there, I guess, to TLDR it. Definitely still a little nervous, and I hope it doesn't affect the quality of it too much.
Okay. So I've figured out maybe a slightly better way of doing this. So everyone who's got any feedback, could you just drop a dot into the general chat so that I know that you're there, so I don't have to keep going backwards and be like, has someone got something else to say? Okay. Rain, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, Sugars. Taking a deep breath is my main recommendation for you. Like, I think you identified really well. Sort of like, from my end, it felt like you're just trying to like cram so much in, and it's okay to kind of slow it down. Like we are at the point of the game where there are very important decisions being made, right? We have people on really low health who are gambling and stuff like that, right? And picking, like Movie called out, like, oh, that was a really important win, right? Like that's the I think the real nugget, more than all of these decisions about all of these little things of like the stakes, right? Now we've established stakes. Like, what does this person have to do to top four? You mentioned like they're playing for placements. What do they have to do to secure a top six, a top four, something like that? Is the story, right? More than the individual details. And Movie, like, I thought it was adorable. Like you started off and you were just like, why? Like the question I have is why? And I was like, all right, like, that's the spirit, but you're the one you're answering that question, right? So and I think as you got a little more comfortable, you got closer into that. But it is that like you're there to tell us why, right?
I just thought that was funny.
I thought it was hilarious.
Like, oh, that's the name of the movie. When they say,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right?
the Leo pointing meme. And yeah, like don't be afraid to take up space. Like you are there, and you've both naturally settled into these like play-by-play color roles that and that's awesome. Like Sugars, you're going to be awesome play-by-play. Movie, you're going to be awesome color. And the color is what gives it color and flavor and spice, right? So feel free to take that a little bit of extra time to continue pulling a point apart, right? Like what's the next piece of what you're going to say, and give us a little bit of that too.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Casanova.
Well, Rain doing it once again, reading my mind, but
Sorry,
I was
bud.
mostly focused on Movie because I was the quacker, so I was listening to Movie real close, ready to quack at Movie, and you didn't earn any quacks. However, that's because I felt like you at least at every point were considering, the why you were taking it a step further than you were in the first part. So I was like, well, none of this deserves a quack. However, piggyback off of Rain, I do want, more from you, right? Like I want you to continue to give me more context as to why something is happening instead of just like one note on it. And I know people are worried about like being too long-winded because that is, a reasonable thing you should be paying attention to, right? You don't want your points to go too long, but right now, Movie, I think you're a little bit too quick on what you're doing, where you're falling more into where like a play-by-play would, to keep like setting up their color during heavy analytical segments, where it's like you give this quick point and toss it to the color and let the color take it, right? And instead, it kind of feels like it's been reversed here, where you're taking these like quick points, and yes, it's all correct, good info, and you are giving me the why, so I didn't quack you, but it was like these quick points, and then it was going back to Sugar, who is, as Sugar even pointed out, taking these more like long-winded sections that probably like we should have been having Movie talk about a situation and then say, okay, it gets to this person who's at 15 life. You've talked about, whatever analytical segment you wanted to talk about. And as we jump back to that board, you're like, oh, this is a very important fight. And then Sugars jumps in and gets to talk about, hey, why is that an important fight? And then builds up the next thing that you're going to talk about. And it allows your flow to go back and forth more. As Movie, you just take a longer point and then just give a nice little way, a little toss that goes to Sugar to kind of reset, pick it back up, and then go to the next thing.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Maisie.
So I was gonna say something kind of similar to Casanova there. So I don't have much in the way of criticism, but I just wanted to say well done again because it's not easy to take feedback in an environment where you got a bunch of peers and you're doing something for the first time. And also the points made initially were really taken on board there. And you both worked together in a way that made it flow a lot better. Like I felt like I was watching a broadcast rather than a practice session. I did find myself at one point completely forgetting this whole exercise. Um, so yeah, GG, well played.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, left.
The first thing I wanted to say was that there's really a huge gap between the second stage and the stage that you casted before and the one that you were doing now. There was a lot of progress actually, and it was obvious that you were getting into it and feeling more and more natural. But one thing that I could see happening here in order to create a sharper narrative here is the negative interaction between players. Like we could see that in the game, like there are a lot of people who are going to be playing Shurima or Zir, right? And his roll down, Travis bought and kept a fourth Azir and now a fifth at the cost of Econ. So that's one thing that definitely could be mentioned, like as part of a storyline that's going to be overarching for the whole game. And in addition to that, there was this thing with Piltover at the very beginning, and a lot of people just open forting to make things more difficult for them. So that's also one thing that could these tensions between players and the things that they do in order to make the game difficult for other players, right? Because if he holds 5 Azirs here, then for Fifek and for Simply Wojtek, who are trying to build their strategists and Shurima comps respectively, it's going to be much, much more difficult to actually hit their units, right? And this is something that going into the later stages of the game is going to have a lot of importance. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Asa.
I had a similar. I guess it's more of a question to left. But I noticed when I'm earlier, someone mentioned talking about what's currently happening and when fights are going on. Is that something that is important? I noticed there was a little bit of that, but not that much.
People tend to do the play-by-play stuff if it has some kind of larger consequence. So, I guess an obvious one would be if someone's running a win streak into Krugs or something, then you early on you would maybe try some light play-by-play if it seems like it's going to be a very close round. But it really depends on if the fight itself is close and has consequence to it.
Okay.
So Dan and I actually talked about this particular subject at one point, and basically we kind of came under the conclusion is that before stage 4, there's usually not very many fights to play by play with that kind of importance. I think the win streakers are the idea after stage 4, though, especially if it's the last game and it's coming down to this one fight. You know what I mean? Then play by play the shit out of it. But that's kind of where Dan and I decided okay, we should start really thinking about calling these fights as fights for the play-by-play after stage 4 is kind of the pillar that we put there.
Yeah, I think Boop's completely right. Think of it as a narrative device, right? When it becomes important for the story of the lobby that we're watching, that's actually start to talk about them more frequently. As Counterfeit said, there's possibility before stage 4, right? Win streak into Krugs, a really close Piltover fight. But you're not, that's not the same intensity as, stage 5, stage 6, when there's, the end of the game on the line.
Also, you are required to play by play if they're about to lose to Krugs.
Yeah.
That is one of those exceptions
Absolutely.
to the rules. Yeah, if you're yeah.
Anybody who could die, you usually play by those fights, right? Like stage 4, someone's dying on stage 4, you start to maybe play by their fights a little bit.
Yeah.
I also had one more question. Boop reminded me about mentioning to losing to Krugs is when you're saying you, I guess something more negative if you're disagreeing with a player's decision, when the Kalista player lost their win streak by not rolling. Is that I guess I just had a question about just like in general talking negatively about the players as a caster?
Propriety. Yeah.
Good question. So there are two things that casters do, I would say, when it comes to giving quote feedback to the players while live on camera. Number one is a lot of us have, just being honest, I think is just a really great way to do it. You're a player, so it's actually going to be easiest for you in particular to do it. And one of the basic ways that you can say it is just like, I wouldn't have made that decision. I'm really interested to see how that's going to work out for them as we move on. Right? That's usually how, like, and that kind of vibe is usually how I see it. The other thing that we do is we all kind of have these phrases that are like, we're saying this is a bad play, but the words that we're saying aren't necessarily that, right? You'll catch it with me if you ever see me casting. If you hear me go, that's an interesting choice, right?
Really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that's how we can also go about it too. Because like say I'm casting with someone like Mort, I'll be like, that's an interesting choice, right, Mort? And then that way the color caster can break it down however direction they want to be. But that's just the two ways I've seen it.
Yeah, I know some casters aren't. I'm in the camp where I think it's totally okay to call a misplay. You just need to explain exactly why. You need to back it up. You can't just say, "Oh, that was a bad play." You have to explain why that was not good. And then especially if they are receiving the repercussions of that. In this case, they didn't roll down when they had so many pairs and so much extra gold with that huge streak, and then they lost by 1 unit, 1 upgrade, and they win that round, right? So it's like, yes, that is results based, but you can talk about how you think rolling would have been good here and correct, and you can see, and the result of that is they lose their streak. Yes, they might have won, the greed might have paid off, but in this case, it did not, right? Like, you explain exactly why that was a mistake. And it is totally fine for you to call out every single misplay you see if you want, as long as you back up exactly why. And as I said before, it's okay to be wrong. As you don't frame it as attacking the player. You frame it as, uncharacteristic mistake, or they even if you have the stats to back it up, sometimes we will be a little bit harsher on a player in that moment where it's like they do this way too much. But it's okay to call it a mistake as long as you explain it and you're not like talking down on the player.
Feels like this is exactly what Movie did, right? When Shredden lost his streak, because he
100%.
he didn't pick a battle augment when he was 100 HP and streaking, and Movie was talking about that, and then exactly that happened. He lost his streak, right? As a result of that, he took too long to think, and Movie explained that very well. So I think that's already something that the guys handled very well.
Yep,
I
that's
think
a good note. Actually, Movie did great there.
I think another kind of way you can present it, which won't be appropriate for necessarily every situation, but if you disagree with something that somebody's doing, it's more framing it as what are the positives and negatives of it. Like, if you think this is a risky decision to not roll down, then like laying out, oh yeah, so he's saving his money, he's not rolling, he's taking the risk, he could lose his win streak here. And you can, ideally in that situation, you can kind of leave the judgment out of it and say, we're making the assumption the player is making their decision for a reason, and here are the reasons they would be making that, and the consequences of that decision.
100%.
That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything left? Or I'll end this half for today. I know we've been running quite long. I'll be looking to just take maybe a 5-minute break before getting into the second group. But I guess from Movie and Sugars, if you had any sort of final thoughts from yourselves as to what you'll be taking forward from today, if there's anything that jumps out to you.
You go, Movie. You go.
Okay. Well, yeah. On that note, just the biggest. So first part was why. I think I got that down a little bit, and then now take up more space and don't be afraid to give my opinion. I felt this like a lot because I do come from like a performance like acting background, and a lot of the time it would be telling me, because I am like a larger person, so like if you're giving a performance on stage, it's good, but on camera I was always told tone it down because it's going to come off a lot different on stage versus on camera. So I think that's still like a mentality that I carry a little bit, and I need to be like less afraid to take up space as like I don't know, just as a person.
And Sugars?
Yeah, for me, definitely gonna try to focus more on, like we were saying before, taking a breath and kind of evaluating the important moments that are about to happen, so I don't miss any big ones. Like when Stinky Abuser needs to win that fight. I didn't catch that until movie pointed that out at the very end. Oh, great fight for him to win. Like, oh shit, totally missed that. So I think with more, as I practice more, I'll be able to evaluate the situations a little better. There was another note I was going to give myself. I totally forgot. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, just kind of, I guess like just slowing it down. And I think another thing too I could work on is being okay with silence. I definitely find sometimes, in this last stage especially, I kind of wanted to just fill the void for the sake of filling the void rather than just like kind of letting something sit and then take that breath to evaluate what the next narrative to present is. Because then, if I just keep talking and talking and talking, that runs into the risk of overloading the viewer with information and such. And not just the viewer, just myself, and just having to keep track of everything. So yeah, I just need to slow it down, take a breath, evaluate. Don't let the nerves get the better of me.
Okay.
That's going to be my big thing to focus on, I think.
All right. Well, Boot, before we go to break, did you want to give them your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think number one, we talked about a lot of what you could do better, and I think what y'all did really well is really encapsulated around when the stage change happened on this one. You actually had a really good back and forth going. I don't know if it was intentional, but it was actually like really good, short, snappy conversation between you two that was like the definition of interactive casting, which is actually really hard for a lot of people to do even later in their casting career. But to see that a little bit of window to like what you're going to be able to do in the future was really, really awesome. So if you're going to look back and watch that, that's definitely where I would go. Number one, when it comes to Sugars, you definitely have that play-by-play voice. That is 100% for sure. You definitely have a knack for kind of understanding the reasoning behind your role there. And something that you did that was really cool was you're actually really aware of when you need to support your partner, which is very, very, very cool, and really cool for someone who's never done this before. That's actually wild to think about. And then movie, like the fact that you were able to take that feedback and expound upon it immediately, like there again, like Maisie said, there is a point in that particular cast that you did where we really leaned into it. It sounded like a good old cast that you see on any other cast that we watch. So if that's the automatic kind of like improvement just on this, I'm super excited to see what you're going to be able to do with even more. So you should be really proud of yourselves. This was a nerve-wracking thing. You were thrown to the wolves, and I think you survived, and you should be really proud of yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was thinking about that, and I guess my question would be, so I felt like obviously the game gets more interesting the later in the stage you go. People are dying. There's more like intense fights going on. Like the early game, is that just like kind of, is it like a story? Or it's like the early game is just setting up the narrative, like saying what's going to happen, and then as you go into like stage 3, stage 4, it's more exciting. This is like, wow, this is happening. This is happening. Like I feel like it was starting to get exciting the second he hit a 0-2, and then everyone came to his board, and now everyone's like realizing that they're in trouble because nobody's going to be able to hit this unit, and that's what everyone wants to play.
Yeah, and so that is true. Something that I do personally, I think this is where you're going to get individual opinions on this, to be honest with you, because I don't think we as an industry have actually looked at the early game and said this is how you're supposed to do it, to be honest. But I think the way that I like doing it is I usually talk to my co-caster and I kind of pick out, 2 to 3 things before the game that I definitely want to touch on and look out for while I'm casting. So that kind of helps with the early game in terms of narrative development. And then a lot of some casters actually use it to just like joke around and like just get the audience warmed up. It's kind of what vibe you catch for that particular tournament. If it's like a community tournament, then, or like when Fight Night was with Crowd and I, then yeah, you'd be a little silly at the early game. But if it's like a competitive tournament, it's a regional or it's GG Tech, right? You're going to be using that time and probably pre-game time to like plan out, hey, this might not happen, but these are the 3 things I'm looking for. And if you see them or I see them, let's go ahead and like really pound these narratives in. So it's super understandable what the point is at the end of this. So yeah, that's how I would kind of consider the early game myself.
Player narratives are big, early stages.
Yeah.
It's where you got the time.
Yeah.
I think theoretically, in a perfect world, like my kind of approach to which I'm trying to develop out with TFT casting is to have narrative threads that are set up in the early game that continue the entire way through the game. So that you foundationed everything you're going to be talking about later on in the early going. You talked about comps, you talked about players, you set up their stories, you set up the consequences and everything, and the back half of the game is all payoff stuff.
Yeah, a really good example that I could take personally that I was really proud of is Rainplosion has a very specific play style, and it's the most first or eighth play style in most tournaments that we see, right? So when Rainplosion is in the lobby, beforehand I know that information. So when I'm in it, I'll be like, hey, Rainplosion likes, sacking in the early game. It's all about avoiding that eighth. We're going to check in every once in a while to see if that happens, and at the end of the game, if she gets eighth or if anything higher than that, you can then still refer to that point that you set up in the early game. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna. I just want to get onto the second pair fairly quickly. We'll take around a 4 or 5 minute break or so. To just give everyone a chance to grab coffee and things. So, Invective and Rain, are you still good to go once that break's done?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, please feel free to hang out. Or we'll resume things in, let's put it 5 minutes from now, so at 37 past, I guess.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for the feedback. It's very helpful.
Yeah, no, honestly, for first time, y'all did really great. And I think you're going to be able to,